Whoopsies, the Harris campaign was caught red-handed editing news headlines and descriptions within Google search ads that make it look like CNN, CBS, Reuters, The Guardian, and other major news organizations are on her side. This is according to Axios. Now, to be fair, it's not strictly against Google's policies and is a common practice in the commercial advertising space. The ads are also labeled as sponsored. Still, when you look at them, it's not clear that the text accompanying the real news links was actually written by the campaign rather than the news organization listed there. Now, Axios reports that the Trump campaign is not running these types of ads, though the same technique has been used by other campaigns in the past. Interestingly, Facebook banned this practice back in 2017, saying it was part of its efforts to stop the spread of misinformation. Spokespersons for USA Today, CNN, and NPR told Axios they were unaware their brand was being featured this way.
Now, the author of the Axios article, Sarah Fisher, tweeted, quote, "Harris camp doing nothing wrong, and Google, which is pretty strict about banning spammy ads, doesn't see it as a consumer harm. News outlets just collateral damage in this weird ads tactic." To which Glenn Greenwald responded saying, quote, "I was shocked yesterday when I saw Axios publish an investigation reflecting negatively on Kamala's campaign. But soon as the reporter, Sarah Fisher, was attacked for doing it, she immediately denigrated her own scoop, saying it was no big deal and Kamala did nothing wrong." So yes, it's legal. I'm curious.
Well, of course it's legal, and it's not counter to, it would be legal even if it violated Google's policies.
My sense is you just shouldn't be able to edit a headline at all, even if it's representative of the truth, which, it seems like they were an example of how she changed them. The Guardian shows a headline that reads, "VP Harris fights abortion bans, Harris defends repro freedom." And the actual story was something similar, like VP Harris is a champion for reproductive freedom. An ad featuring the link to the NPR story, it says Harris will lower healthcare costs. I think that, yes, there are stories that have come out with similar headlines, and changing them to be more brief and slightly more favorable, it's a little bit weird, it's unnecessary. It's not as egregious as Elon Musk recently posting a Telegraph article that's just blatant disinformation and doesn't resemble a headline that ever actually existed. But it's just a silly practice.
Well,
no
is Elon
campaign
Musk
should
running
be...
for president? That's the standard? If Elon Musk did something worse, it's okay?
No,
it's ridiculous.
That's not what I'm saying. I already said no one should edit a headline. I am saying there is a difference in putting blatant misinformation, saying Keir Starmer's putting people in detainment camps, and saying NPR wrote a story that said a Harris presidency would reduce healthcare costs. Those are different.
Yeah. Fine, they're different. Although, as I pointed out yesterday, you can respond to that post if Elon or anybody else on X gets something wrong. You can community note it to death, as did happen in that case. This is on Google Ads, where there's no such... on Google, where there's no such function. She made it look like, if you're saying that the original headlines are similar enough, then just leave them alone. She made it look like that was perspective coming from the news outlets when really it was perspective coming from the campaign. And I say she made it look like that. I don't know. She is not personally responsible for what happened here. Someone in the campaign did that. It's very bad. It's just a deceptive, it's a kind of routine, somewhat deceptive practices that happen in political advertising that is par for the course. Do I think it's the biggest deal ever? Certainly not. Do I think, it's a crisis that people are being lied to this way and they're being, their minds are being manipulated? No. But this is the kind of dramatic language by which the other side, by which the mainstream media, misinformation watchdog people describe every single thing that is even slightly deceptive on the right. They describe it as, how can we even have democracy or fair elections if the other side is allowed to do, slightly deceptive things? But the game is being played by Democrats and Republicans. This is a good example of that. And I just think the whole misinformation framing has been so blown out of proportion. Now, when people say, mainstream media people, this is misinformation, that is misinformation, often it's just an opinion they don't agree with that is part of the legitimate debate. This term is just losing all meaning very rapidly. Now, anything you don't like is misinformation. Like, show me on the doll where the misinformation touched you. It's getting to that level of hysteria, and it's just done on both sides. But like all campaigns use somewhat deceptive practices. This is a somewhat deceptive practice. It's not the biggest emergency ever, but neither is a lot of the stuff done on the right.
Yeah,
is what I would say.
I think that's the right perspective. I mean, the right does that all the time too, though, and that's why I don't like either party, because they compromise their own values and morals when it's their team doing it. So I don't think the right accuses the left of this more, or the left accuses the right of this more. They both, at their political convenience, accuse the other of whatever makes them look better and the other side look worse. There's never any logical consistency to it. It's like when Donald Trump was assassinated and suddenly Don Jr. and other right-wing commentators did believe that rhetoric could cause violence.
Yeah, that was really
a complete 180.
I called that out
saying in the past.
Unreservedly. I thought that was totally stupid.
Yeah. And so I think that, yes, this should never happen. There should never be a headline attributed to a major news organization that is not one that they have written or their editors have written.
Yeah.
I think that, bottom line, shouldn't happen. Of course it has, and our elections are really messy in the United States, but I think now that there's attention to it, Google should take action and just decide, we're not going to let that to be put in ads. But it is probably a process that doesn't have as much oversight as it should at Google. A lot of people run ads for their small businesses. Maybe bigger ad buys like ones for the Harris campaign have more oversight, but I imagine there's quite a lot on down ballot races that would slip through the cracks there.
Yeah, by the way, we reached out, Rising did, to Sarah Fisher, that reporter, and did not hear back. I think Glenn's point is well taken, that she actually had a pretty good scoop that, again, is a minor point of something bad the Kamala Harris campaign did, and she is falling over herself to acquit Kamala Harris of any wrongdoing. Like, what are you, people are going to say this is more evidence of how just in the tank for Kamala mainstream media organizations are, that even when they have a good scoop, they want to undermine their own reporting so as not to, maybe so as not to make Kamala Harris's team mad at them because they're hoping for exclusives and all that sort of stuff later. That's an issue. That's something I always appreciate about the outlet we work for, The Hill. No matter how, I've never gotten any pushback, no matter how critical of the Biden administration or Trump or any, how critical we are of political people. No one at The Hill is ever saying to us like, we're seeking access. You got to shut up about that, which is something I imagine happens a lot at a lot of other outlets.
I will say, any candidate that is running center-right, protecting corporations, fighting for the military-industrial complex to stay untouched, these are all candidates that the mainstream media has always liked, because the mainstream media has corporate advertisers and is run by corporate shareholders who have a vested interest in having the stock market remain intact, profit margins high, so return to shareholders are high. It's always in that interest. If Harris said tomorrow, I'm going to fight for Medicare for all, suddenly she wouldn't be a darling in the media. So it really has nothing to do with her personally or the Democrats, but that she is very willing to play this role of being a centrist who culturally panders to movements that are positive for women in the LGBTQ plus community, while ultimately being a pro-military industrial complex corporate candidate.
Yeah, I think she would get praised by the media if she came out for Medicare for all.
No, she wouldn't.
As she did previously. She would get praised if she came out against it. I think she'd get praised if she ate a ham sandwich. I think no matter what her policy prescriptions are or what she does, she will be praised by progressive media as long as she doesn't become like anti-woke
Progressive
or
media
something.
and mainstream media are not the same thing. Mainstream media is not progressive.
As
soon as Kamala Harris came out and said she's for taxes on tips, there were articles about how that wouldn't work. Same policy.
Really? Where? Really? No. What there were is, so when Donald Trump came out, we might just be describing different media organizations. I take your point. I wasn't talking about left people. Left publications, I know, are actually committed to I disagree with their principles, but they're committed to their principles. And sure, they will criticize Kamala Harris for policy failures on the left. I agree with you there. I didn't mean truly left media organizations. I use left and progressive
Democrats.
differently. But you can, if you use them synonymously, that's not what I meant.
Liberal.
Liberal publications will love her no matter what she says. And as an example of
But they won't love
that,
her if she endorses Medicare for all.
sure they would. They don't care
No.
they just love her.
They
regardless.
bully every candidate into being a centrist.
Well, CBS News had a headline when Trump said the no taxing tipped wages thing that was like a move that could really hurt government revenue, or they had a shading of it that was negative. When she announced the same exact thing, you had no such shading. You can put them side by side, the two.
But it's not the
tweets.
same person saying these things. You can't compare apples to oranges when you think about these outlets. When I worked
It's
for
a
the
news
Bernie
reporter
Sanders
at the same
campaign,
outlets, though.
every candidate that supported Medicare for all, every candidate that talked about increasing the minimum wage, they were running ridiculous stories of economics that just doesn't make any sense, saying that this would somehow be bad for workers if we increase the minimum wage.
I think it would be
that
bad
somehow
for
it would be
workers.
bad for the economy and would reduce our quality of health care in the country if we made it more affordable. Whenever there's a candidate running on a policy platform that is progressive, that makes life better for working class people at the expense of corporate profits, they don't like that candidate.
All right, more Rising right after this.